Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Good Cast Show. So my guest today, he's a returning guest. We've enjoyed his time here the last time. I loved his input and apparently you did too. So to just see how well he was received, I have some comments here that I'd like to highlight from YouTube and TikTok where the videos were shared. So first we have the First Division _main 26 on YouTube said, come on already, we want the full episode. By the way, on that note, I would like to highlight that from now on, because every one of you all have been commenting, I'll be posting the full episodes first and then the clips, because you guys have been very frustrated with that. So I do apologize with my way of posting. So now we're going to go with that. Next one comes at ordinaryman4751 on YouTube, who said, why no full Joe Samad? I think he was referring to the full episode again. The full ones will be coming out soon. Next one, we have Tanla1404, who said the difference between East Malaysia and Peninsula in terms of racial interaction is due to the mouths of the politicians. Wow. Then we have Puvaneswaran Supramaniam 19, who said, well said, Prof. Thank you for stating the points. But unfortunately, folks in federal government are too ignorant and arrogant to admit its follies. Sati6395 says, first time I'm listening to something real and compelling among Malaysian podcast makers. The guest made our day worthwhile. Thanks. I'm persuaded to go get the book. And stay tuned for this one because you want to get the second one. Next, we have Nairawi on TikTok who says, salute to Joe Samad, a living legend. Thank you. The good show we know. No worries, guys. That show was good because of Dato. I had nothing much to do with it. The next one is ESL4267 who says, salute you, sir. History is history. Why change the fact? And then we have Judge, interesting name. He says, very intelligent and rational scholar, down to earth, should be our next PM. So that's perhaps something to consider. Next one, we have PK, who's on TikTok, said, Joe Samad is a type of Muslim Malaysian needs. Those who criticize him should remember that people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones at others. We have Brian Lim, who said that Joe Samad narrative is essential and necessary for building Malaysia. I have read his book and it's gave me a great impact and view of our country. DS Fans, who says, what shocked me more is how come a brilliant mind and visionary like him is not already a Sabah Chief Minister, or at least one of the minister in Sabah State Cabinet. Again, Dato, something to consider. And we have Thomas Manikaraja, who said, Dato, how I wish more Malay Muslims like you exist in our country. So honest, so open, so sincere. Yusuke Takeru said that thanks for having a podcast with Dato Joe Samad. Always appreciate his thoughts and opinions. And I think this is the best comment to end this. This comes from Orang Borneo, Sabah. He says, I've been waiting for this podcast since you posted on TikTok. I subscribed your channel and you better bring Joe the second. His second book is out, man. Anyway, love the podcast. Love what you do, sir. Thank you so much, Orang Borneo, Sabah. And that's why we have him here. So without further ado, in accordance with your comment, he is for the second time to discuss his latest books, Revisiting the Social Contract, the Malaysia Borneo Perspective. You can get it now on Gerak Budaya. It's on sale. We'll be sharing all the links in the descriptions of the coming videos. So please welcome a columnist, an author, a political commentator, past deputy director of the Sabah Foundation and CEO of the Institute of Development Studies, the Sabah Government Think Tank, a dear friend of the show, Dato Dr. Johan Arifin Samad. How are you, Dato?
Yeah, thank you very much, Vinod, for inviting me for the second time. Very excited to join today's conversation.
Yes, always a pleasure to have you.
And thanks for all the compliments for the people who bothered to look in and read my writings in the past and all that. I'm very grateful that I'm in this position to write something, to share something, which resonate with a lot of people.
Definitely, you do, Dato.
Yeah.
Now, Dato, again, I mean, this book is a bit more punchier than the last one that we reviewed, Revisiting the Social Contract. So why did you decide to publish a book on the topic of the social contract when not many have done so?
Yeah, that's interesting because I didn't expect to come up with a second book so soon. One of the comments at my book launch was that I'm quite productive, one book a year so far, and they're asking me to write a trilogy. So actually I'm on a third book, writing a third book. And yes, there may be a trilogy to complete my series of what I'm discussing. So first of all, let me explain about the social contract, which people don't seem to understand. I don't blame them because this is a Western philosophy, but adopted by the UMNO's leaders in 1980s. So perhaps the idea of the social contract, which started with the 16th century philosophers, French philosopher Jacques Rousseau and so on, Rousseau, so on. Basically, it states clearly in simple terms that I scratch your back, you scratch mine. So the rulers at that time and the people forged an agreement, so-called agreement, where the rulers protect the people in return for loyalty or taxes or whatever they have agreed upon. So it's a two-way relationship which benefits both sides and gives protection. So in the context of Malaysia, when UMNO brought it in, this was forged apparently in 1957 before Malaysia Federation, Federation was formed. So there is an unwritten contract. I must emphasize unwritten. Okay, it's not written. Understanding that the two or the three major races have agreed to certain terms, like to give Malay rights, including religion, Islam being the paramount religion in Malaysia, Malay rights in terms of economic privileges, and licenses in education and so on.
Political as well.
Political as well, and of course other associated items like languages, Malay language, and so on. So these were a trade-off for a citizenship, 2 million citizenship at that time, where the immigrants came from China and India to work or find their fortunes in Malaysia, and they were not really as citizen in the Malaysia context, 1957. So there was an agreement forged between the three parties of the Malaysia Federation at the time, that they would agree the trade-off between these two communities or three communities, Malay, Chinese, and Indian, that they will agree to give Malay the priority in all these areas, which I mentioned earlier, economics, politics, and so on, in return for citizenship. So that was a simple explanation, but it was never written down. And some claim that it has been written in the federal constitution to certain extent. Okay, so now we can see that there are some elements of the social contract in the constitution where the official religion is Islam. Okay, is one example, but whether it's directly related to the social contract is more speculative. So anyway, even today, the social contract is still being used or misused by our politicians, from Anwar Ibrahim to the UMNO leaders, Zahid Ibrahim, Tengku Razali, and so on. So I'm just wondering what the social contract, like any other person, that is being bandied about in the political arena and all. So I did research and all that and found out that this social contract, in many writings, like Mahathir's writings, Badawi's speeches, even the current UMNO leaders' speeches and claims, and also in many writings or utterances, political speeches, which has mentioned the social contract. So I was intrigued, what is this social contract? Because they say, in all these writings, talks and all that, it was extended to Malaysia when Malaysia was formed. So as I mentioned earlier in my other podcast discussion with you, Malaya was formed in 1957, Merdeka, and Malaysia is from 1963.
Yeah.
So I was intrigued to find out why 1957 social contract has been extended to Malaysia in 1963 in their speeches, in whatever talks, debates that they have. And I came across also a speech by Raja Azlan Shah, who was also our former Lord President, the highest legal person of the land at that time. He also mentioned that the social contract has been extended to Malaysia in the constitution. So I did a lot of research and found out the word Malaya has been substituted with the word Malaysia. Okay. Oh, sorry. The word vice versa. I mean, all right. So I got confused, Malaya and Malaysia, and I've explained in my talk before that Malaysia is a new sovereign nation, right, as opposed to Federation of Malaya, which is non-existent today when Malaysia is formed. So.
And also just to add that, because in this book you mentioned something quite interesting where you say that when the formation of Malaysia was not supposed to be considered to be one homogeneous nation. It was supposed to be a partnership between three sovereign states, which is quite interesting. Actually.
Yes, that's correct. So I'm saying that Malaysia 1963 is a new sovereign nation. So why should we carry the baggage of Malaysia 1957, a so-called agreement between three races? And extend it to Malaysia, which consists of 50 ethnic races and maybe 200 sub-ethnic races. So we are not part of the 1957 social contract, and we don't have the three main races, Malay, Chinese, Indian, in East Malaysia, as you know, right? So there's different aspects of the racial composition. And our histories and Malaya histories is totally different, right? Although it's interconnected in some ways, but it's different, right? So, why should you extend a social contract forged in Malaya and used by UMNO and extend it to Borneo, all right? And the problem with the social contract is the emphasis today on race, religion, and what we call the three R's. Today, right? And as I mentioned previously, we don't have the one R, which is the royalty, to contend with, but we have the race and religion issue to contend with. And the social contract is being used by dominant politicians, especially, or the Malay extremist people, to say that, hey, this agreement, we agreed to that, and therefore we shall continue with this to what? To eternity? That was one of the questions asked during my book launch. When is the social contract to be completed or to end? Is it forever into the unforeseen age where the social contract will be imposed on the nuns, which Malay, Chinese, Indian, and all the Sabah Sarawak natives?
I mean, in the book early on, you do quote, I think you do say that the social contract can be a tool to actually help marginalized communities. In its most purest of forms, right? Obviously now, after so many decades, the social contract has sort of devolved into, as what you say, as a tool, as a more of a divisive tool than anything to actually help the community. So how can this contract, in its earliest, in its most purest form, be actually beneficial, and how can it help marginalized communities?
Yeah, I mean, to be objective, the earlier concept in its pure form should not involve the politics of today, the three R's, I mean, okay? It should be an agreement between two parties looking after each other. So basically, like what the United Nations motto, nobody should be left behind. No one should be left behind. So I think in this original form, there is this balance between give and take in the parties who sign up to it, right? But over the years, it has become more of political tool used by, especially I'm not politicians, to be frank, to what you call subjugate the other peoples or other races in Malaysia, especially Borneo. That's what we're concerned about. So this relates to what's in today's context of using race and religion to further your aims or consolidate your aims. And we have seen that in many instances. Okay, I mean, you had that China flag waving incident, which is blown out of proportion. Then you get the HAL certification, which not many people in Borneo will agree with. And you know, now we got the Mufti bill. So these are being used by people also as part of a social contract, because we have agreed, so-called agreed, that certain race has the superiority of religion or economic power, political power, to continue their ways. You know?
But I mean, just to backtrack a bit, because when I was reading this book, of course, this is a topic that is very important, but especially its historical connotations and what it means today, but it's not really discussed. Are you challenging the social contract? Are you creating awareness on the social contract because you want people to sort of wake up from their sleep-like states when it comes to this issue?
Yes, I mean, but first of all, my intention is not that. My intention is to wake up the Borneo people to the fact that this social contract has been extended to them by default. Okay, meaning that they don't know that the social contract exists and that it's being imposed upon them. Okay, so that is one of my main worry, because in all the writings and talks and debates and all that, as I mentioned earlier, the word Malaysia used. I mean, the word Malaysia was substituted for Malaya. All right. So I mean, without you knowing that the social contract is Malaysia's social contract. Now, how could that be? Because I already explained my talk where Tommy Thomas was present there. When we form Malaysia, it's completely a different country altogether. It's a sovereign nation. How can a contract consisting of parties, Malay, Chinese, Indian, which was forged in 1957, be extended to Malaysia, right? How can it be? I mean, it doesn't make sense. In legal terms, it doesn't make sense, right? Because Malaysia is a new sovereign nation, right? Malaya does not, the Federation Malaya does not exist anymore after Malaysia is formed, right? It's Malaya, Singapore, Sabah and Sarawak, right? Of course, Singapore existed, left the country after a few years.
Yeah. I mean, when you have certain entities, like, for example, people from Sarawak, politicians who have publicly said that this does not involve us, right?
Yeah.
That this does not extend to us. And now from what I'm seeing, and there is no tangible document here, if you talk about the MA 63, it clearly states in your book as well that we weren't meant to be, as I said, we weren't meant to be one nation. It is a partnership of 3 sovereign states. So it means this social contract was more of a verbal thing that was that is uttered sporadically by other prime ministers as you go on. You talk about Mahathir when he meant, I think it's 42 points or 45 points about what this thing is.
58 points.
50, yeah. So my question is, I mean, in the end of it all, this social contract that we have sort of been listening to from the time we were kids to now, can we sum it up as something that doesn't exist, or it's not, or is it something that we should take note of, or is it something that is just stardust? It's in the air. It's completely irrelevant.
I would just say that it exists in mind.
Mind, okay, but not in reality.
It's not written down.
Yeah.
So that's why I counter-propose that we have a social contract, which is the Malaysian Agreement 1963, and it's written, and it's law. It's an international treaty, as compared to some unwritten concept forged in 1957.
Yeah, but another interesting thing that in this book that you talk about is that you.
Can I sort of?
Yeah, please.
Add a little bit. Sorry, you were talking about East Malaysian understanding of it. When I wrote an article about the Muara Melayu, I commented on about the 58 points that Mahathir wrote, and it was picked up by the local newspaper there. And the late James Massing, who was the deputy chief minister of Sarawak at that time, pounced on it. And the reporters asked him about my article, and he said, there's no such thing as a social contract, okay? And it doesn't exist in Borneo states. Don't associate anything with East Malaysia. You keep these things to yourself, right? Because we have no issue like Malaya in those days, where we grant citizenship to millions of Chinese in return for what? That's nothing to do with us. So he has made it clear, and I'm just relating to that in my book.
Yeah, you do mention that.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah.
I like. Now, again, this book, when I read it, there's a lot of revelations that I didn't know, and we'll definitely get into that. So one of it is that, is the social contract in sync with our federal constitution?
That's a difficult question to answer in terms of direct connection, right? But there is elements of it in the federal constitution, all right? So I'm not saying it's directly the wholesale of the social contract is put in the constitution, but there are elements. I mean, the elements of the social contract is Malay rights, okay? The Agong supposed to protect the Malays and the natives of Sabah and Sarawak. Religion, for example, is the official religion, okay, which is part of the social contract, because that's what the original leaders who sat down and negotiated with the Chinese and Indian leaders wanted, priority in all these aspects, including language and privileges, which I mentioned earlier, but scholarship, licensing, and business priorities and all that to help the Malays.
As always, Dato, your writing, as I even said in the previous interview we had, is you don't hold back, and you throw some knockout punches here. One of it was a quote which I really love, and I would like you to elaborate on it. You said, "History does not support the present-day Malay claims that they are the original inhabitants of Malaysia." Could you please elaborate on that? I was like, wow, that is such a nice quote.
Well, there are many utterances in Parliament. One of the famous utterances is by Tajuddin Salak MP.
Yes, Pasir Salak.
Yeah, Pasir Salak. It says,
who can forget him?
Yeah, Malaysia is Malay land, which is rubbish, because Borneo is not Malay land. Okay, I'm very sorry to the Malays out there. Borneo is not Malay land. Okay, so the whole Malaysia land is Malaysia. It belongs to all the people and races that makes up Malaysia. It's not belonging to any particular race. There are histories to say that Malay archipelago and all that, but you must remember the Malay archipelago is not confined to Peninsular Malaysia. Philippines and all the surrounding regions have called themselves Malays, and it's more a generic name, right? So to utter in Parliament that Malaysia is Malay land is an insult to Sabahans and Sarawakians, right? So I think this is one of the use of the social contract.
Yeah. Now, again, back to the social contract. If it is something that is unwritten, if it is merely an understanding, as you say, it exists in our minds. If people from East Malaysian East Malaysian rulers have sort of denounced the social contract, what or who gives this social contract power?
That's a good question, because I think my good friend in his forward, Taufik Tun Dr. Ismail, has raised this question. Who has the jurisdiction over the social contract? Who is the arbitrator of the social contract? And basically nobody, all right? So, but it's used by the Malay leaders efficiently as a crutch, as a tool, okay, to further their own ends, all right? But how long can you give this crutch to the Malay society. I mean, they have to be developed somehow to compete with the rest of the people in the nation as well as around the world, right? So this social contract maybe is a difficult word to accept or to explain, but in today's context, let's just put the 3 R's. That is a social contract in reality today that is being played out, and when they're asked, or Malay groups are asked or challenged, they go back to the social contract, 1957, which says, there was an agreement that we should be the superior race, and you have to abide by all the agreement, so-called agreement, unwritten agreement, in 1957, right? And then that also encompasses Sabah and Sarawak by virtue of being a default nation, as I mentioned earlier, right? Without us knowing. So that's why I have to wake up Sabah and Sarawak fellas and say, hey, look, this thing is being applied to you, all right? So you better read and understand and push back, because this is not what we signed up for, all right? And this is not what Malaysia is all about. So I think to explain it in easier form, this social contract has morphed into the 3 R's, which is being played out. Any incident, whether the Akmal socks or whatever issue, they'll say, hey, it's a social contract.
Yeah, you should know your place.
And the social contract says that Islam is the official religion and so on, and you must not step on religious issue, which is we already agreed upon in 1957. Now, how does that relate to Sabah and Sarawak?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But before we go to the next part, I just want to get your thoughts on this. If the social contract, as you mentioned in this book early on, in its purest form, can be beneficial to marginalized communities. Okay, let's assume now that we come to an understanding that the social contract does not extend to Sabah and Sarawak, that it's only a peninsular matter. In your opinion, as an outsider, as a political watcher, do you think that the social contract has succeeded in Peninsula?
I don't think it's a question about whether it succeeded or not. I think the question is it still being applied? And the answer is, of course, it's still being applied. I mean, I've cited some incidences. Even Tengku Razali in May this year have cited the social contract. Even Anwar Ibrahim, Madadin government have cited it over the issue in Penang when one Indian student stood up and asked, why there's not enough scholarship for the other races. And he openly cited the social contract. So politicians find an easy way to explain this thing by, hey, it's a social contract. You have agreed that in 1957. But if you're just born today, hey, I'm not part of that generation we have agreed, right? I'm a Malaysian citizen. I'm entitled to whatever other people is given.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Yeah.
Now, another thing in this book, and as I mentioned earlier, one of the revelations that I did not know of, where you say that when talking about the complexity of the formation of Malaysia, you have mentioned that Kelantan state government at that time took legal action against the federal government. I'm just curious, why did they do this?
Well, basically, they didn't agree to the terms of the Malaysia Agreement 1963 at that time, all right? And to say that all the federated states agree to form Malaysia is not true. So the reason I brought up Kelantan is to show that in this part of Peninsular Malaysia, there are states who are concerned about the issue, right? And they don't agree that whatever the terms agreed by the British and the Malay leaders at that time, to prevent that from happening, they took the legal action to ensure that they are not part of Malaysia. Right?
Yeah, and interesting because you talk in the book how many other parties also had a lot of concerns about, even the British had concerns of bringing Sabah and Sarawak into the Federation at that point in time, concerns about how they will they fall under the rule of the government, will they not have any autonomy and all that, which unfortunately has sort of become reality, and which I bring to my next point. You also mentioned in this book, you said history has proven that Tunku Abdul Rahman was wrong in his assessment of the future of Malaysia when the Borneo leaders' worst fears become a reality. Now, of course, in this you say this in reference to the prevalence of identity politics and restrictions on religious freedom in Malaysia. But my question is it fair to pin this on Tunku Abdul Rahman when one could argue that the current identity politics fad, the slow depletion of religious freedom is because of the BN regime and prime ministers after him?
Yeah. That would take a long explanation, but let me summarize it. The ones I quote in my book is pre-Malaysia discussions, agreement or speeches and all that. And there was an objection from Sabah Sarawak people at that time about joining Malaysia or forming Malaysia. A lot of apprehension. The natives of the interior of Sabah were totally against forming Malaysia for good reasons, all right? And the Malaysian Consultative Committee, which people can read, had 4 meetings, is formed for basically to inform the people of this region what Malaysia is all about, to allay the apprehension and fears, and so on. So that committee consists of representative from Brunei also. Tunku Abdul Rahman was part of it. Razak, Mustafa, Tun Fuad, all the leaders, Sarawak leaders were involved. So their fears and apprehension about Malaysia, as with Kelantan, of course, which I mentioned in my book, as an example from this side. So many speeches are made by Lee Kuan Yew, Tunku Abdul Rahman, Tun Razak, and all the Khair Johari, the previous leaders leading to the formation of Malaysia. So they promise in their flowery speeches freedom of religion, wealth be shared, and it will be a happy nation. They use the word happy, okay, in one of the speeches. And it's also in the proclamation when they said happy, they use the word happy, right? Now, are we happy today? Of course, we're not happy. We were the constant bickering over race and religion and so on. So what was promised earlier in the formation of Malaysia and what is in reality today, 2 different things. Now, whether we can blame these people, our forefathers, for falling into this false speeches, and I can't really say that Tunku Abdul Rahman is to blame, but the early days of UMNO, I think it's on Jaffa or something, I read, where UMNO was supposed to be a multiracial.
Which is why he was asked to leave.
Yeah, they was asked to leave. So there are leaders in those days who have that foresight to open certain parties to multiracial groups. And had he succeeded, we would not have MIC or MCA to contend with and rule the country for 60 odd years, up to 2018 when the UMNO government fell. So we can't blame former leaders for their past, which we probably call now mistakes or misguidance and all. But I think we should stick to the fundamental reasons why Malaysia was formed and what Malaysia is all about at that time. And probably Sabah and Sarawak was closer to the Malaysia concept than what people think it is, okay? And now we got this Malaya concept, all right, which is far distinct from the Malaysian concept, which is associated with DAP, unfortunately, but it's not DAP's concept. It's actually a Malaysia concept, all right? Where all races are respected, treated as equals, and so on. What's wrong with that? I mean, what's wrong with Malaysia concept? It's not a communist concept. It's a fair concept, which I think Sabah and Sarawak have signed up to.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, but don't associate it as just a DAP concept. The concept was Malaysia's concept, and it's not Malaysia concept. All right, which we Sabah and Sarawak did not sign up for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing, just a question here, because in this book you quote a statement by Sarawak politician Woon Lee Shan, who said that Sabah and Sarawak were acquired by Malaya from the British. So is there any truth to it? Because reading this, I was like, wow, is this like when America bought Alaska? Is it the same?
Sometimes words are used out of context, that. But it's words used expressing frustration.
Okay, fair enough. So it's not true. It's not true. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, of course, midway through this book, you go into you also highlight MA63 here. It's also discussed in this book, and you talk about how several areas in the administration of Sabah and Sarawak, but in this case, let's just stick to Sabah, where you lament the lack of autonomy, and one thing that you said here was that you said that how the tertiary education, whereby Sabahans lack autonomy. So how has Sabah's education system suffered as a result of this lack of autonomy?
First of all, when Malaysia was formed, there was certain demands from Sabah and Sarawak. So in terms of Sabah, we always talk about the 20 points and Sarawak the 18 points. So I think when it comes to education, point number 15 in the Sabah 20 points is that education should remain under the control of the state. And I think in the 14 points out of 18 in Sarawak mentions the same, that education should be under the control of the state. And how this education control or policies move towards federal, I still trying to understand the sequence. But when we formed Malaysia, the policy was following the 1962 Education Act, which is a federal education policy. And then I think in 1966, it was fully taken into the federal control, right? So I think Ong Kili, in the early run, magazine wrote an article giving the history and background how this happened, and basically not only how it happened, but it was taken over at that period to be under federal control. So in the early years, it was not a problem. I think we were lacking behind in terms of education system, schools, and teaching, and so on. But it became more and more strained as we progress, because Islamization has crept into the education system, and more priority is given to Malay language, teaching of religion and all that, and forgetting about STEM, mathematics, science, and so on. And I think over the years, politicians like Mahathir tried to appease us by allowing for STEM subjects to be taught in English and all that. But eventually, I think today it's being controlled by certain people using a social contract. Again, I would say that, because of our superiority in terms of social contract, that we want it to be more towards Islamic teachings and speaking of Bahasa and so on. There's no issue in that area. It's just that how much time is spent on religious classes as well as Malay language. I mean, there's no problem accepting Bahasa as Malay language. We should support that. But to say that at the expense of English, expense of Chinese, some Tamil subjects, I think that's wrong. I think in many countries we encourage people to take up second, third languages and all that. So there's no issue about that. But don't overemphasize it and use it as a racial way of controlling people in Malaysia.
Why do you think there is a difference, or I could be wrong even if there is, but from the outside, me looking in, there is a difference in the way Sarawak and Sabah sort of handle this issue? Because recently there was an article that came out where Sarawak, highlighting the fact that English is still the official language of Sarawak. And Sarawak has this sort of boldness, a very straightforward, like, this is what we are doing, we don't really care. Like recently the Chief Minister also corrected Tun Mahathir's statement, where basically saying that Sarawak should basically pay for a lot of things and all that. They're very. Why can't Sabah do the same?
Well, I think I've questioned that myself. But I think being an analytical person myself, I think both states, first of all, come from different histories. Okay, so people think we homogeneous states.
No.
One was ruled by White Raja, and the administration was different. One was ruled by North Borneo Trading Company, which is a commercial outfit who don't care anything but profits. So that was the history of our colonial past. North Borneo Company didn't think much about their education, or didn't think about promoting political parties as way for democratic life. But Sarawak, under the rule of Raja, made sure that there is a proper administrative system, a state legislature. In fact, they're the oldest state legislature in Malaysia, right, Sarawak. So differences in approach. But coming back to the concept of English, it is one of our demands in the early days before we joined Malaysia, that we be allowed to speak English for certain periods, even in Parliament and in the State Assembly and so on. But over the years, as you know, the Malay influence came over and replacing English as one of the major languages to be taught in schools. So what Abang Joe is doing is to take it back and to promote the use of English as a second language, not the first language, right? So why is there a different approach? From my analytical view, Sabah likes to go through quiet door, backdoor talk, and they don't like to confront the leaders in KL, whereas the Sarawak side are more open towards that.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons is because they have less interference by UMNO. We had
you have UMNO in Sabah
for about 13 years, and federal interference from the Rotational Chief Minister to importing illegal immigrants to balance up the racial balance in Sabah. Sarawak has less of that issue, all right? So they're sort of more pure in that sense of following up Malaysia Agreement 1963, using Malaysia Agreement 1963 as the agreement to fulfill what was supposed to be fulfilled for the people of Sarawak, all right? Yeah. So coming back to Mahathir's comment, I wrote an article. I don't know whether you read about that.
No, I didn't.
I wrote an article about that and said it is not fair for Mahathir to say that, right? Because he has admitted in a 218 Pakatan Harapan manifesto. Yeah. People don't read. Read it, please. Yes. Go back to Pakatan Harapan 218 manifesto, which he, as Prime Minister for 23 years plus 2, under Pakatan Harapan, has declared openly, and he signed a forward that UMNO BN has been stealing the wealth of Sabah and Sarawak all these years. And the 218 pledges to give back what is rightful for us, Sabah and Sarawak, and our oil royalty, he promised 20%, which never happened. So as a Prime Minister, you admitted in writing
you should know better.
that you have robbed Sabah and Sarawak, all right?
And then
and
you
now
say-
he's saying, please give me.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. His
Doesn't
statement
make
really didn't
sense.
make sense.
Yeah.
Now, again, just on that point, you also mentioned there is a quote here from someone, I cannot remember who it is now, but we talk about they wanted more autonomy in healthcare. So I just want to get your opinion, Dato. What are the areas in Sabah? And of course, you have talked about the oil royalties and all that. So let's just leave that aside because we've talked about it in great detail in the previous interview. But other than the oil, what other areas would you want to see more autonomy for Sabah?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about education just
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
So okay, I think to make a nation, there are few focus areas, obviously, right? I mean, education is one, health is one, infrastructure is number three. But they all should combine together to make a nation work, our state advance. So I think education, we talked a little bit just now, and of course infrastructure was still inadequate. But
Powers.
yeah, but I mean that's quite a straightforward issue. Either you do it or you don't do it. But coming to health is a major issue, all right? Because health creates a person, right? If you're sick, you can't be functional or contribute to the nation. So health is one area which has been neglected by the federal government, right? That we have depleted hospitals, not enough doctors, short of medicines, and can imagine if you live in a village miles away, and this the real cases where you have to go and see a doctor in a hospital, say in Kaningau, and doctor examines you and all that, and then give you the medication or treatment, and ask you to come back next month. Okay, for example, now these guys live in a inaccessible area. We'd have to cross rivers, bad roads, and all that, and pay 50 ringgit to the transporter to go to hospital, and 50 ringgit probably is his money for the next 2 months to live on, right? And it has to come back a month later, paying another 50 ringgit to see a doctor who may not be there, okay, because he's either absent or I mean, these are real cases. So, of course, rural health has deteriorated significantly in Sabah, and this is the reason why during Warisan time, the Warisan government time, they've created the Ministry of Education and Health, okay, just to readdress this issue, all right? But unfortunately, education and health is under the federal government, funded by federal government, and you can create a ministry, but without money,
You can't do it.
you can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, I think before the podcast started, I was telling you about how there was several facts that broke my heart when reading this book. One of it, of course, was related to Dr. Farish No, but I will keep that for another chat. I hope he comes on the podcast, so I don't want to mention it here. Another one is that I have always had the perception that Tunku Abdul Rahman was one of those ministers, prime ministers, who were very inclusive. They were very, he sort of was very different from what we see now. But one thing that's mentioned in this book, and please elaborate on this as well. You say, I mean, in this book, you quote an incident where a Dayak was supposed to be chosen as chief minister of Sabah. And then Tunku Rahman opposes this and says that there is an unwritten agreement. Again, there's an unwritten agreement that the CM should be Malay. Why did this happen? I mean, could you elaborate on this story and give your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not actually sure how this came about, but in my readings, and I did confirm with the current leaders who were part of the government at that time, there was such an issue where, that like what you mentioned just now, where the chief minister's spouse and the TYT spouse should not come from the same race. So this section is under, in my book, under federal interference, basically, how federal government interfered in Sabah and Sarawak. And that is not only the in the example, there's language also where Kalong Lingkan, the famous constitutional crisis in Sarawak, people should read that, where he was removed forcibly by the federal government.
Yes, and there was a state of emergency that was uttered, right?
Yes, it became a constitutional law crisis in Malaysian law, right? So people should, lawyers are well aware of it, and how the federal government tried to override the constitution. So there is such a understanding, according to some of the leaders in Sarawak, that this
incident
has occurred. But how the background of it, I'm not so sure. But all I said was it's another display of federal interference.
And there are plenty of examples here.
Yes.
Another one, speaking of federal interference, is that you talk again. I had no idea about this, but this is unique to Sabah, of your chief minister rotational system. I, for one, and then you also do a comparison between Sabah and Sarawak, where you say I think in the past 60 years, Sabah has seen 15 chief ministers. 16, whereas in Sarawak it's only 6. So of course that leads to more stability. But how damaging has the system been for Sabah?
A lot of people in Malaysia are not aware what Mahathir did to Sabah. He imposed this rotational system of chief minister, 2 years term. If you read our state constitution, there's no such thing, right, where chief minister go on rotation. You elect a chief minister for the term that 5 years or what, unless the government falls, it'll be a different matter. But that's what we elected for. And of course, we elect a chief minister that we like. We elect the party that we like, or the representative that we like.
So, just to highlight one point. So you're saying that this rotationism is not mentioned in the state constitution?
No, of course not. It's not mentioned in the federal constitution either. All right. Well, it's just one man like Mahathir says, "Hey guys, today we're gonna start this rotation system of 2 years, 2 years."
Another unwritten. Is it like that? Is it similar? It's like it's just because he said it, so it's reality.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Well, Mahathir was king at that time. I mean, he decides everything, right? So unless you can prove to me that there is a law that says that Sabah should go on rotation, I'm glad to be proven wrong. But there's no such thing as that, So it was just another agreement, where to appease or to keep UMNO in power, all right, that they have this rotation system on pretext of having this UMNO BN in power. They have this rotation system. And we're the only ones in the whole nation that suffered this experiment or this imposition or whatever. And if you ask me whether it has benefited Sabah, yes and no. I mean, perhaps you would say there was peace. There's no political quibbles at that time, infighting and all that for that period of time. That was the experiment. But the downside is it stunted the growth of Sabah, all right? Because can you imagine, you have a 2-year term, you just come in the first year, warm up the seat and all that. And of course, every chief minister has his own idea, his own thinking, ego, right? Say, okay, I want to spend more money on health, for example, all right? But before he can come up with his, execute his plan, right? Another chief minister come in because that's his turn, right? And the other guy might say, okay, I want to Islamize the state. Right? So I spend my whole 2 years on promoting Islam, for example, right? So each chief minister, by their own right, have their own ideas and policies in mind. I mean, it's to be fair. I mean, if I came in also, I would have my own ideas how to develop Sabah and all that. But that's where the damage took part, So we slowly became stagnant, regressed, whereas other states had economic growth and all that. This was explained by Professor James Chin when he came over to Sabah, and in his opening talk, he mentioned this, highlighted this. We have 16 change of chief minister and Sarawak only 6, right? And so it's bad. I think the whole of Malaysia should know, that this is an experiment that didn't go well with the people of Sabah. That's why we are like that,
It's interesting you say that because it's an experiment. Because when I was reading, I was thinking, well, then in that case, the current system that we are employing at the federal level, which is a post-electoral system and also consistent, vote elections and instability, may be bad for the country as well. When you don't have stability as you had before.
Well, here you don't have the rotation system, but you had a change of 5 prime minister in a short period of time, right?
Yeah.
Similar to
Sabah.
2 years. 2 years,
similar.
And what are the results?
Nothing
right?
much.
Yeah.
Now, of course, in the end, I also enjoyed this book, especially at the end, because you become more reflective. And I love to hear your thoughts and the way you process things. And so you said this, that the social contract has led to a sense of absolute self-entitlement. Now, of course, you have talked about it in this discussion, but what are the negative effects that this social contract has had on modern society today?
The impact basically arising out of social contract is the 3 R's. Okay, that's the direct impact, because one particular race is using the 3 R's to maintain the position of power. I call it the pole position in my book, and this does not go well with the development of the country. Okay, that's the first point, right? But the social contract, where I look at it, is not totally negative, and I mentioned it earlier in my introduction. If it's for the benefit of all the other states as well, especially Sabah and Sarawak, which is left behind, is good. Okay, because now we have perhaps a balance of development. Okay, not only for one race but also for other races to catch up and be on par with the rest. So at the end of the day, my book is all about, although I bring up these issues, is to tell also the people that this is not on, but how we can come together as one race by understanding each other, our roles, our duties, and our position as Malaysians. Okay, not to create friction, divisions, and so on by using a particular concept, social contract, or Ketuhanan Melayu concept and all that to divide the nation, all right? So when we understand the real concept of the social contract based on the original philosophy, minus all the political items which UMNO likes to bring up, then I think we can understand that there are obligations by both parties in a contract, for example, Malaysia Agreement, okay, where we all sign up for. There are certain obligations by the federal government towards Sabah and Sarawak, and vice versa, Sabah, Sarawak towards the federal government in terms of paying taxes and so on, and supporting the government at the federal level to carry out these policies and all that for the benefit of the people of Malaysia. So I don't look at the social contract in a bad way per se, but I think most important is to, if you want to use a social contract, use it in a positive way, as I mentioned.
Now, just quickly, you do talk a lot about. I mean, of course, this book is it says the Malaysia Borneo perspective, obviously. Now, the social contract, of course, has its impact on Sabah. We've seen it. I think we can accept it right now. It's bad. But what about your opinion on the communities on this side of the land? Like when it comes to the Indians, to the Chinese, to perhaps the Orang Asli here. How bad has the social contract been for us? You feel?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like any other normal person. I mean, I get depressed to hear that only 10% of the scholarships or entry in Mara, for example, are reserved for the Indians and the Chinese, all right? Even if they got 10 A's, 12 A's,
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
all right? They can't get into the institution, right? And the institution is totally Malay institution and all that. But whatever reasons the Mara gives and all that to protect their concept of a university, I think it's about time now that we do away of race, religion, all these divisive terms, and really open to merits based system. All right. I mean, it's still okay to have a kind of social contract in place to get others to catch up. All right, but don't make it a race-based policy, right? Okay, I think everybody now in 2024 has a different view of what has occurred in 1957. I think Tommy Thomas has mentioned in his talk during my book launch that the concept of social contract in 1957 is different now. This is different to today's idea of social contract, right? And whether that social contract should remain intact or have needs to move on to accommodate the situation today, right? Obviously, the politicians are using it in their speeches. I can rattle off so many references which I did in my book. They're still using it. For what reason? It's only to keep themselves in power. It's only to subjugate the other races, which is not good for Malaysia. I think they should stop using the social contract. Unwritten, do away with it. But talk about, meritocracy and giving opportunities to all the other races. The concept that all Indians are rich, all Chinese are rich, because they send the children to private schools. The only reason they send them to private school is because they cannot enter into the local universities and all that. Okay, and then most people that I know, my Chinese friends, Indians, are not that rich. Okay, they're just the same as us, living in the middle class, but still can't afford the expensive fees to send the children overseas. But they make their sacrifices for the sake of their children's better education. And that must be admired. So, but if you're given everything by the government, if you say you're Malay, you're given everything, sometimes you don't take it as serious as other races who have to earn their living and their rights to that position where the Malays are entitled to.
Now, today's world is a different world, and you talked about how times have changed. But do you think with the globalized world we live in, where countries are now investing in other countries, we are having mixed workforces, it's truly a one village kind of concept. Do you think that there will ever come a time when the social contract needs to be revisited and maybe even removed entirely to ensure the prosperity of the country?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, in the context of social contract, which I'm talking about, there is nothing to remove because it's unwritten.
Exactly.
So, but if you accept there is such a concept and there is evidence that people are using this concept, like I said, in their heads, maybe not
in real life,
then you're projecting something which doesn't exist for your own benefit, right? So I think we should stop using this term, the social contract, and move on. That's a Western philosophy. If you're Malay, why you want to believe in Western philosophy? You should be following the Quran, where it says clearly that we are humans who are peaceful beings, right? And we project the love for all humankind, not just for one particular race.
Yes, exactly. So thank you so much, Dato Joe, for coming on.
Thank you.
I hope you had a good time.
I think it's a very difficult subject to discuss because of this philosophy which is borrowed from the Western world. But
Yeah.
I think in conclusion, it's related to the 3 R's which we face today, and I think it's a good discussion.
Yeah, I hope you had. I certainly had fun, and I hope you come back for your 3rd book as well. We'll definitely discuss that.
All right.
So, guys, there we go. It's called Revisiting the Social Contract: The Malaysia Borneo Perspective. I enjoyed this book. It's a topic that is not discussed a lot besides speeches by political leaders, at least from my knowledge. And again, Dato Joe's writing is straightforward. It's an awesome book. So we'll be sharing the links. Please get your copy. And thank you, Dato, for writing this book.
Thank you, Bernard, for inviting me a second time.
Thank you so much. So that's all, guys. Please, as always, please like, share, subscribe, share your comments, share your thoughts. We can't wait to hear them. And, if you guys want to see Dato again, then let us know, and we'll hopefully invite him for his 3rd book. Take care. Have a good weekend. Bye.